And now the end is near, and so I'll face the final curtain. I did it my way. Well, that was a very lousy attempt at doing my way to hint at what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to this episode of the podcast series of the 4 speeches every leader has to know, focusing on, of course, what speech?
The farewell speech.
And I did it my way is a version of that in some sense. I'm Bård Nordheim.
And I'm Joar Haga.
There are many farewell speeches, many famous ones, like the farewell speeches of Jesus or Muhammad, or even a very famous one by the baseball player Lou Gehrig. We have farewell speeches by presidents and generals. But what's really at stake in a farewell speech, Joar? Maybe we should first make the distinction between what we call the self-directed, or when it's a chosen goodbye, when you're not forced to leave. If you're forced to leave, we have a different sort of situation, speech-wise, don't we?
Yes, I think the self-chosen also covers the when you're leaving because you're getting old. I think, it's sort of
or when you're leaving for greener pastures, and it's okay
yes.
to move on, sort of.
Exactly, you're not being fired. That's the
or replaced, or
yes.
So then it's usually hidden.
And because the self-chosen farewell speech is, or when you hold a farewell speech when you are leaving voluntarily.
That's the point.
The organization or the company. I think it is traditionally understood as an epideictic.
Celebrative speech.
Yes, a speech that you hold in order to portray the present as good as...
We raise a glass for this, and
yes,
we raise a glass for that, and a particular thank you to you.
Thankful for having served the organization or the company. And
you thank your family, usually.
Yes, and you're praising the virtues that are there, in a sense.
So the virtues or the DNA of a company, or what maybe Simon Sinek would, in his Start With Why, would be described as the why of a company, what we have called the legacy, is what's at stake in a farewell speech, isn't it? So it's not, it could be, if you're fired, it's your personal legacy, so that's a different story. But if it's you leaving the company, the question the audience is left with is, what now? What now with this company? We've been led by this guy for a while. What's next? Can we still give ourselves, be dedicated to this particular legacy? So then...
Yes, and that's the intriguing part of saying goodbye, isn't it? That the ones that you are saying goodbye or farewell to, they are actually going on further. They are continuing the walk or the legacy. They are sort of carrying on.
They're carrying on the legacy. So
and then the question arises: what will happen then? And what we found out was that the farewell speech is not just about saying thank you for the past or describing the present as particularly
something worth celebrating. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But it's actually something about the future.
And I think that was a real discovery for us as we started to analyze actual farewell speeches, to find that, well, there is definitely this, for some people, the long list of thank yous. Thank you to the cleaning lady, and thank you to the janitor, and thank you to, some would say, no one mentioned, no one forgotten, or whatever. But all these thank yous often serve as also bringing up character witnesses for the legacy you're defending and upholding as something worth fighting for. And as you leave, when you leave as a leader and deliver a farewell speech, you could say you have no potestas anymore. You've lost your formal power. So all you're left with is your auctoritas, your storytelling, your poetic abilities.
Yes, and I think especially the point that you mentioned, that you pick out either a particular story, a particular member of the staff, a particular worker who has embodied the virtues that you think are the most profound to the legacy. I think that is the selection that is required to do a farewell speech.
So it's not mainly about praising that particular person. By praising that person, you say, this is what we are about.
Yes.
So moving on to not moving on, but looking at the farewell speech in the light of the 4 modes of naming yourself, naming reality, naming who we are, naming the cause. Usually in a farewell speech, naming yourself very extensively is not needed because people know you, but you would name yourself in telling stories.
Yes, there's another thing in naming yourself, and that is, I think, the expected self name of the leader leaving, and that is to be thankful.
Yeah,
and that is not just by saying thank you, but it's also being thankful, and that could be, I think, affected by many things. For some, it's just to sign a certain kind of gratitude in the being, and it's not always about words. I think
it's also how you embody them. You have to appear, I think, generous and thankful, and
if we take your point, by when you're leaving the formal power, namely the potestas, the power to bind other elements in your organization, you still have authority in the sense that you tell, and you could point to something in the future that you think is important,
and that you can claim with credibility, say that this is where we nailed it, or this is the thing.
Yes, yeah. and then you are naming yourself not just as the leaving leader, but as the leader who still has some things to say about the future.
But isn't it so that if you're not thankful, if you're not generous, then people will have a hard time listening to you giving a farewell speech, because it's so much an expected part of that genre to appear thankful, generous, looking at the big things, so to say.
Yes.
And in the tradition of, for instance, in presidential elections in the US, you have the tradition of the concession speech, that even those the candidate who've lost, in his or her thank you speech, which is sort of a forced leave, but still has to appear thankful. Otherwise, you cannot say anything. It's sort of an expected part of the genre.
Yes, and the other thing is that it's constitutive to the power itself. So it's you are sort of not just you are not allowed to stay in power if you are not elected the next term. Yeah. And but I think as leaders, they should also be aware of the power of naming distinct virtues, to picking out distinct people or praising.
Instead of just saying, this is a fantastic place, we have great workers, I love you all, this is wonderful. What you're saying is that it's more powerful to tell a story. Let's say, when I was in my 4th year as a CEO here, I met Gina, and Gina showed me how she did accounting, and the way she did accounting was, to me, a reminder of what this firm is about.
Yes, or you could say 3 years ago we had a major breakdown in our economic expectancies. So we had a real problem with the banks, for example, and then you stayed on. You fought, or these people fought, or this very person,
and even
fought.
describing how you fought, isn't that?
Yes.
So I think this.
So then you would use the leaving moment as a creative moment of showing people what this,
and igniting sort of why it's worth suffering for still.
yes, and what this organization is about.
And it seems like many speakers underestimate the power of the particular. So by describing something very particular, you might be more successful in describing the grand or the greatness of this.
Yes, and that's the poets do that. They don't tell story about abstract concepts.
No.
They actually find a grain in the sand, and they describe that,
the grain.
The grain.
And even with your thankfulness, I imagine, describing what is it that makes me thankful? What's the particular things that, just not just saying I'm thankful, thank you, but what is it that moves you? What is it that makes your heart sing?
And I think when you are leaving the company, it's also an opportunity to say something about reality as you experience it. What is at stake? What is the challenges for today and tomorrow? It is also I think by addressing these virtues, I think you will say something about reality as such, and through these people, or the virtues that you describe, I think you also, the people who are listening to you will get a sense of who we are as an organization.
So sort of the bond between the one who's leaving. In a way, the bond is broken, but there's still a bond here because there's a legacy. There's something uniting us.
Yes, and he was also replacing himself with the speech in a sense. Yeah. So even if
the speech lives on in a sense. Yeah.
Yes, if he is leaving, the speech remains.
The speech remains. We'll listen to the beginning of a farewell speech. It's a very it's particular in a sense because it's the former First Lady of the United States of America, Michelle Obama. And in some sense, you could say that it's, they were forced to leave, but they were not forced to leave because you couldn't do more than 2 terms. But she has chosen to do her last remark as a First Lady on a particular occasion. It's the annual event of recognizing the School Counselor of the Year. This year is 2017, 6th of January. So she uses that event at the White House to give her last address. So in that sense, she's not thanking everyone, but she's expressing her thank you in a very particular setting, and using that, we'll hear, to will also say why there is something here still worth suffering for. But let me make a comment on that and try to connect it with the 4th mode, namely the course.
The course. And if you are naming the course, it's not irrelevant the setting that you're naming this course in.
Exactly.
So a large part of her and the Obama's idea was to have proper education for all people, and I think it's a very creative moment of when she's leaving. She's leaving among people who educate young people.
Yeah, and she sort of puts a departure in that sort of powerful spot of those who educate, as you say, young people who want to build an America for the future. And
exactly.
They introduced the metaphoric of hope again, that her husband so eloquently used as a president, or particularly in his campaign.
Yes, and also it's to use the teacher and it is also another interesting element in the speeches, namely to use people that are not there, but are there sort of in the role of the ones who are teaching them. So she's using children as the sign of hope by not letting them be present, and that is also a quite elegant.
And interestingly, if you happen to watch the video, behind her, there's almost like a choir of those school counselors cheering for her and cheering for the purpose that she's advocating. And then, of course, you have the immediate audience in the White House, but also then the larger audience who's watching this online in some sort of sense. So I think that's also a thing to keep in mind when you give a farewell speech. Do you have a choir? Do you have someone who's
standing next to you?
Standing next to you,
yes,
who are sort of the prime defenders of the legacy that you're promoting.
Yes, and that points to the choreography
exactly.
of the farewell speech. That it's not just to take the microphone to stand there alone. That would be that's one way to do it. But you could also reflect on and ponder on what could be the ideal circumstance for.
So in a sense, she's not saying I did it my way, but we did it our way, and you'll continue to do this. I hope for you to continue to do this. It's not this lone soldier who's sitting alone in a bar, which is usually how you'd imagine the sort of I did it my way.
Yes, and she is also just a part of the Obamas. She is not the president.
She's not the president. But let's listen now to the beginning of her speech and sort of maybe the mood of a farewell speech.
Hey, what's going on? Thank you all so much. You guys, that's a command. Rest yourselves. We're almost at the end. Hello, everyone, and may I say for the last time officially, welcome to the White House.
It's fascinating with this. I mean, there are lots of thank yous, applause for them back. We're almost at the end, and she goes on to introduce the particular occasion. She says, we're beyond thrilled to have you all here to celebrate the 2017 National School Counselor of the Year, as well as our State Counselor of the Year. And it's a really long speech, and it's almost like, she's almost like a pastor, I would be tempted to say, because she communicates with the audience forth and back. And even as the speech goes on, she addresses some of those who are in the audience, and they would respond. There are no hallelujahs, but it's a very sort of, in that sense, apodictic, celebrative speech, but it turns out it moves into a more political speech in the end, with more of this, as you mentioned, praising the importance of education for young people.
The choreography is even more visible when the people that we represent, namely the audience, sits down, and the choir of teachers they are standing behind her, and this gives the impression that it's not just that she is not alone, but there are hordes of
it's like a choir of angels.
Exactly, and this is
Gloria.
this is the impressive mode that she's playing with, or she instigates this moment of being in a large surrounded space,
So moving from I did it my way to use another song term, we're all in this together from High School Musical. So it's this, we're all in this together. And maybe that's why if you're watching a TV show or the end of, in Europe, we know of the Eurovision Song Contest. You want everyone on stage for the last final number. You want the flower ladies. You want everyone you want this at the farewell at the end. You want it to be packed. So for the leader then to invite people in to that farewell, isn't that a point, you think?
Yes, and the sense of community is very important for the end.
Yeah.
And it's also the classic end of a comedy, that at the beginning of a comedy you have a perfect society, and then the society is threatened, and then it's reunited again with a celebration, preferably a wedding.
Yes.
And that is actually where society is at rest.
Restored as well.
It's restored, and it's at rest with itself.
Yeah.
And this is a very profound feeling that we are, at last, we are not alone. We are
a taste of heaven, in a sense.
Yes, you could say, perhaps say so.
Yeah. So a few keys to the farewell speech. It's an opportunity to look back to your opening speech. It's definitely a moment where you could share what made your heart sing, share the good stories. You need to show gratitude and don't be bitter. And you have to tell people why all the suffering was worth it. You should, if you point to the future, which is a good idea, you should utilize the legacy, as we talked about. You need to say goodbye with style, and maybe find a way for people to remember your last words, because they might both define the company and are easy to remember, and maybe even define your personal legacy. So find those few words that could make people remember the speech, because as you said, the speech remains there. You leave, but the speech remains there. And those words are spoken at a pub, and you can go back and say, you remember that night when those particular words were spoken. Yeah. So before we end this, also a suggestion which doesn't really necessarily have to do with the actual farewell speech, but it's the idea of the leader writing his imaginary farewell speech every day as he leads. What does that imply?
I think it implies that the idea, the company, the organization is a greater thing than you. You are sort of just an
instrument.
Well, yes. An instrument, a leader in some time, but hopefully the legacy will go on, and it will live beyond you. This is I think it's a very, very profound thing. Both if you live in a family, you hope your children will live longer than you do.
Absolutely.
If you're a farmer, you hope the farm will prosper. Even
beyond
if you
era.
Yes, and even if you are left 6 feet underground,
yeah.
and you hope also in the social life that some things would just live on. So I think this is something.
The preparation to lead as a preparation for the farewell speech is also a way to lead with credibility, isn't it? Because then your test question is, what can I say when I leave this company?
Exactly.
What stories can I tell? What made me trustworthy? What made the vision I presented and me worth following? Yeah.
Yes, and it's a moment you can also reflect on your relative status within the company, that you are perhaps important, but you are not indispensable.
So, and now the end is near, and the time has come to say we're all in this together.